What's up, everybody? We're back to do the Spring 2025 Multi-Crit Review and... What do you mean we're already in the Summer 2025 anime season? I thought we still had more time! But I can't just skip out on this video. Fine. I guess we'll have to speed through this one really quickly. So without further ado, let's start the Spring 2025 Multi-Crit Review.
All systems ready, aim, and fire.
Incoming message.
Huh?
Hey, since we're trying to rush through this, I think we'll have to cut the bits for this video.
What? But the bits are one of the best parts. We were gonna end this with me exploding.
Yeah, I don't care. Just skip past this and keep the video moving, okay?
All right.
Good. Message ended.
But this was gonna be such a funny bit.
First on the list, we got I'm the Evil Lord of an Intergalactic Empire, a series written by the same writer of Mob Psycho, or, Trapped in a Dating Sim series, as this story follows a down on his luck man who, after his wife cheats on him, and he ends up dealing with a few other things, kind of like groping incidents where he didn't actually do it, but the person claimed he did, or, his daughter saying she prefers the person that the mom is cheating on compared to him and whatnot, and by that I mean like as a dad. But basically all that spirals into him being very, very depressed until this guy offers him a chance to go to a new world, just one of those isekais, and thus he ends up finding himself in a world of mechs and fantasy stuff as he finds his family just handing over the planet to him, as he's just now the evil lord, as he calls himself in this series. But the whole joke is the fact that he's not actually an evil lord, as he does stuff to actually help them. But yeah, that's just kind of all I can really describe with it, so we're just gonna roll with that. So now, going into this anime, I wasn't entirely unfamiliar with the source material, as since I had originally loved the Mob Psycho books, at least at the start, like the first 3 volumes, I absolutely loved. Volume 4 was okay. I despised Volume 5, and Volume 6 was okay. I was a bit worried about this volume, not just this volume, but like this whole series, because I was worried that the writer might end up going down a bad rabbit hole like he did with some of his other works with the Mob Psycho series. So I wasn't too certain I would like it, and after reading the first volume, I felt like I was kind of valid in that, because it's just fine at best. It's fairly mediocre. It's not too special. But despite that, I decided to give this anime a shot, and sure enough, it's decent. However, there are some aspects to it that I really liked, such as them expanding upon the opening dialogue, which originally was just a bunch of monologue from the main character, and because of that, they really did expand on it, and I liked that a lot. I appreciated it, and it definitely made it feel like it was going for a more steady length, and it made sitting through it a lot easier, as they really tried to make sure that we fully were able to grasp why this man is the way he is and whatnot, and I really do appreciate that. And the characters in the story are fun enough. The story has its good moments, but overall, I didn't think the series was that much more fun than the light novel was. The light novel was just kind of average, and this anime is just kind of average too. It's still decent, and I still had a fun enough time, but I'm worried that it would end up kind of like how Mob Psycho does down the line, because I don't think everyone has this opinion, but for me, I thought Volume 5 of the light novels for Mob Psycho was absolute dog shit. But maybe the story gets better later on. I might end up picking up the light novels for the Evil Lord series. Again, this isn't a bad series, but the anime is just fine, and that's why I give I'm an Evil Lord of Intergalactic Empire a 5 out of 10. With that said, let's talk about a story where I had to watch a witch and her wacky antics. Next on the list was the fairly anticipated Witch Watch, which was said to be a really hilarious series with a lot of comedic moments and an overall really entertaining story following the misadventures of an ogre boy and a witch who's also his childhood friend and also wants him to be her familiar. And so I went into this with positivity, because I love comedy. Some of my favorite shows are comedy based, like Love is War and The Eminence in Shadow. Just some of my favorite shows are comedy based. So, did it live up to all the hype people were saying with how funny it was? Well, yes and no. I'm not afraid to admit, I thought the first 2 episodes were some of the most unfunny, boring slop I've ever seen. Like, it is some of the most generic comedy you'd ever see. I really didn't vibe with it at all. I thought it was super unfunny, and I just didn't think anything was really that hilarious. Like, I was worried that the whole show would end up being this boring fest of weird comedy that I just didn't really sit with, because it was just the regular old, oh, girl tries to use a spell, oh, spell goes wrong, oh no, ah! And it's just, those cliches work fine for some stories, but sometimes it's also super predictable with the direction they're going. And as I said, I thought the first two episodes really weren't that funny, so I wasn't really sure about the show and was even considering dropping it. And while I do think that as the episodes improved, in fact, episode 3 to 6, which I ended up sitting through, did improve. In fact, there was one episode even where I could not stop laughing. I still think that the show overall does not really hit the right vibe, because one of the biggest issues it has is that it doesn't really have like the correct wittiness for the type of comedy it's trying to represent. Like, it'll try to drag out scenes for so long without really spoiling. For example, there's this one moment where the girl uses like an enlarging spell, and the way I feel like it should have gone is whenever she activated it, for the stuff to just automatically grow large and give her reaction stuff like that. I feel like that would have been really funny, but instead it proceeds to show us the things growing and then panning to a bunch of different shots of characters reacting to the growing and then cutting to that shot, and I just feel like it didn't really hit the comedy levels. And that's kind of why I compare it somewhat to shows like The Disastrous Life of Psyche K, which in my opinion is one of the most hilarious comedies I've ever watched, where that type of comedy, it does that exact thing, where a lot of the time it'll introduce concepts, but then after that it will just cut through the concepts. That way it hits a much more hilarious impact, and I was kind of hoping that Witch Watch would do that too, because that would really hit the comedic tone that I feel like it was going for. But it didn't really do that every single time, and while as I said, I do think there is one episode in particular where I was just like laughing my butt off. There was a lot of times in the show where I felt like things could have been sped up or slowed down, but mostly sped up. And while it's not the worst show I've ever watched, I don't know if I could really see myself sitting through to the end of it, and that's why I give Witch Watch a 5 out of 10. Leaving things there, let's go on to the next show on this list. Next up, we have Old Country Bumpkin to Meister Swordsman, a fantasy anime following an old man who's a skilled swordsman who ends up finding himself being brought to the capital and becoming a teacher for the knights there, and he finds himself getting into all sorts of different situations while he's there. So yeah, moving past the little story summary, this anime really interested me at first, since the first episode hooked me immediately, especially with some of the CGI fight scenes, which in most anime are really distracting, but in the case of the first episode for this show, it was actually incredibly smooth. I really do like how they kind of focused on certain angles to make sure that the CGI was less obvious, and the animation was still really smooth with that CGI, and it looked really clean, and it felt like they kind of had a good idea of how swordsmen were supposed to move, and I really did appreciate more of a focus on swordsmanship over all the normal like fantasy magic stuff, though that does come into play later in the story. However, the more I watched, the less I kind of enjoyed stuff like that, because the swordsmanship stuff, it becomes a way less vital piece of the story, and instead it does focus less on trying to teach people to use swordsmanship and have the main character understand his worth, and instead it's more so about how every single one of his students wants to bang him. Like, literally every single one of them, for the most part, seems very much romantically interested in this man who, despite the fact he was already in his 20s to 30s when they were children, now they're just like, oh man, I really want to be together with my teacher. And it's just, sometimes that in stories can work, but when you literally put it flat out like this, it's just weird. And what I mean by it works sometimes, I mean like in the sense of like maybe they're actually older or of the same age actually, or something like that. But in the sense of this, the age gap with all of that feels weird, especially with the fact that we saw them as kids before, we see them as where they are now. And because of that, even the main character admits that he finds the idea of being together with them a bit weird. And it's just seeing a grown man who's clearly much in his older years and having his students try to be in love with him because, they grew up being taught by him. And even though the fact that we literally saw them as kids, it was weird, and sadly it became a much more prominent part of the show. Thankfully, it didn't overly take over everything. It wasn't too bad. Still though, I didn't love it. Also, I hate to admit it, but as the story went on, it just made me care less and less about things because the story didn't really make too much sense emotionally wise. Like, there were moments where characters were like, I'm sorry for this, or oh no, why do I have to do this? And while I get why they feel that way, I don't really feel it myself because I didn't really have enough time to grow a connection with such situations and stuff like that and the characters within them. So in the end, it's not the worst series I've seen, and I don't think it's awful, but just overall, I give From Old Country Bumpkin to Meister Swordsman a 5 out of 10. But leaving that be, let's get into the big ecchi anime of this season. Next we have Please Put Them On, Takamine-san, a story following a boy who learns about the secret of the student council president, where she has the power to reverse time by taking off her panties and exposing her private parts for all to see. Basically just exhibitionist time travel powers. And once she realizes that he knows about this power, she uses that to manipulate him into carrying spare panties around for her and acting as her closet in order to give her new panties all the time throughout the day whenever she uses her powers. Now, I'm sure we all know how this is going to turn out. It turns out she really is in love with him for some reason or another, and the whole thing is just an excuse to get close to him. But with the exception of a show like Nagatoro, I've never really enjoyed these types of stories, especially with how far Takamine pushes things during the story sometimes. Like how when he first doesn't agree to be her closet, she then frames him for assaulting her, even though he doesn't. She literally frames him for it, and then uses that over his head to basically say, you gotta carry on my panties, otherwise I'll make it look like you're a criminal. Which, in order to start a relationship with him, is not a good way to get things off the ground. And honestly, with how much the girls embarrass boys they're crushing on these types of stories, it's ridiculous how these boys ever fall for them, and I feel like it's just gonna end in a toxic relationship because so many of them are these things where the girls will do literally everything in their power to embarrass this guy, but it's okay because they're in love with them, and I just don't really get how those narratives work at all, because there are so many instances where bully animes are just where the girl is just bullying the guy to no end, and instead of standing up for himself, he's like, oh, okay, oh wait, now we're in love right now, right? Yeah, okay, cool. And it's just, I don't really like that, but still, there are some nice moments between Takamine and also the main character, but I just felt like the good moments of those two didn't really outweigh the bad moments, as I felt like this whole manipulational thing was a bit much, and I just didn't care for it that much, and I didn't really like how this type of stuff goes down. I just watched it because it was being talked about, and yeah, I don't see myself sitting through to the end of this, and that's why I give Please Put Them On, Takamine-san a 4 out of 10. With that done, let's talk about an anime that reminded me of another series I watched. Next up, we have the unaware Atelier Meister, whatever the name is, which follows a boy who was kicked out of his party and now sets out to find a new path in life despite being an innocent cinnamon roll. All while the story reveals he's OP in certain areas of life, because that's how it is, and thus, we simply follow his adventures as he continues living his life with all the new people he meets, which most of them are going to probably fall in love with him because that's just how this type of narrative goes, so yeah. Now, moving on to the reason I said this reminded me of another series is because it's not due to the whole kicked out of a hero's party genre, which, you know, is just a generic thing. Like, I did not expect it to become such a prominent story thread these last few years. Like, I don't know if anyone else knows, but there is a crap ton of kicked out of the hero's party type genre stories these days. But the reason I brought this up and saying that this reminded me of the series was actually because of the innocent, naive boy who's actually OP type of stuff with, you know, a yandere-esque love interest among other characters. It reminded me a lot of this show I watched one time called The Last Dungeon Boonies anime. Like, I don't remember the exact name, but it's like the kid from Last Dungeon Boonies, where we follow a main character who's innocent, naive, but is actually incredibly OP, which, I'll be honest, I think I would rather watch that one because that one was far more entertaining than this one. But even so, the series wasn't the worst. I just felt like it could have been funnier and also given a bit more of a personality of, like, maybe the main character does notice this stuff, but he tries to play it off or whatnot. I just feel like the whole plot is very mediocre. It definitely isn't something I cared much for, and it's not awful by any means. It's just perfectly average. In fact, most of the anime I watched this season were perfectly average. And while this does have its good moments, I really do wish that the series was a bit less of a, oh man, he's innocent, but is also oblivious, so he doesn't know how OP he is, and more so of a, maybe like he knows he's OP, but, you know, maybe he just doesn't really want to acknowledge or something like that. I feel like that could have been funnier, but it is what it is, and that's why I give the unaware Atelier or whatever Meister a 5 out of 10. With that done, let's talk about an anime where the creator saw one of the characters he created as his own wife. Next up, we have the Shiunji family children, which follows a set of siblings who learn from their father that they're pretty much all adopted, and thus, an incestuous connection begins to form as the MC finds himself in the midst of all his sisters starting to crush on him, creating the well-known harem of beauties many rom-coms love to make. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, this series was actually written by the creator of Rent-A-Girlfriend, and while I can't have much to say on that since I stopped watching after the first season, I was still curious to see what the creator made with this series, so I dived into it with an open mind, and put simply, it actually wasn't that bad. I was worried this story was just gonna dive all into the incest route the minute everything was said and put out on the table, but surprisingly, the story actually takes its time, slowly developing the girl's feelings towards the MC, and he doesn't just immediately fold into it either, as for the most part, early on in the story, he very much makes it clear he doesn't want to see his siblings that way. And while I know that's obviously not going to happen by the end of the story, besides one of the sisters who immediately just like makes her feelings known, every other character has had more of a steady, slow pace, which I know it's kind of dumb to say that I partially enjoyed this series, but compared to a lot of other rom-coms I've seen where it's just the same old thing of the characters just being these people who don't want to make their feelings known, like they're all just immediately in love with the MC and they just try to hide that for the entire series. This series makes it less about that and more so about these characters starting to see each other in such a romantic light, which I know it's a bit weird to compare everything since, you know, it is one of those incest-esque animes, which not really something I vibe with that much, but I still gave it a shot, and while it's not my favorite anime ever, I was surprised how it actually handled itself slightly better than I anticipated, which is why I give the Shiunji Family Children a 6 out of 10. And with that said, let's get into the only sequel on this list. Next up, we got Go-Go Loser Ranger Season 2. Now, as for the story of this season, we follow D, who's been assigned to the Green Squadron, and now he finds himself dealing with a missing people case, which leads him to find himself trapped in this mysterious school that just kept looping along with a few of the other members of the Green Squadron, and it makes you wonder, how is all this going to play out? Well, only time would tell. Now, just like the first season, without going into any spoilers, this season just keeps everything going. Like, I am loving every single moment of this series, and every single episode just blows by, as I just want to see how things keep going, because Dee's story and everyone else's story is so good, and while there are still moments of, like, awkward CGI here and there, I still can't get over how good this series is, and I am so excited to keep watching, because, dude, this series is just so good. It is so freaking amazing. I'm having a blast with it. Dee as a main character continues to be absolutely phenomenal, and we get to see so many more developments in the story, and from where I am right now, things are just getting even more intense, and I'm so excited to see where things go next, and that's why I give Go-Go Loser Ranger Season 2 an 8 out of 10. With that said, let's get into my favorite show from this season. Last but not least, we got To Be Hero X, a show I was kind of pushing aside for a few weeks till I finally decided to just suck it up and check it out, and since then I have not looked back because this show is so freaking good. So to put simply, this story follows, at least at the start, because it's kind of like a multi-character type story, we follow a man named Lin Ling, who after watching Hero commit suicide becomes his replacement, as due to the world's reliance on a thing called trust values, he has to take the hero's place, because if people were to learn the hero's dead, you know, the trust values would go down, and then also the company would kind of fall apart and whatnot. So because of this, the main character has now taken the hero's place, and because of the trust values, he now has the powers of the hero and stuff like that, and thus we follow him as several other heroes' origins are also getting revealed, and we just get to kind of see not just him, but a few other characters come into their own and see how they become the heroes they are today before we get to this big tournament that's set to come down, I think, later in Season 2. But moving past that, I just want to talk about this anime because each episode is jam-packed with so much story, and before I knew it, I was just so invested in it. And I also really loved how, even though it was mainly a 3D anime at the start, it did mix some 2D elements in there, which I found made it very refreshing, as it kind of felt like we were kind of experiencing a more realistic aspect at the start, where it was like, alright, we got the 3D where things are more serious, and then we got the 2D where things are actually trying to kick it up a notch. And I loved it. I truly loved how they blended those two together, and I was so excited to see where things go. But then we get into my one issue of the series, because you see, in recent episodes, like in the 10 to 15 episodes, sadly, they've been putting a lot more focus on the 2D aspects of the narrative, which I get it's supposed to be part of the whole narrative, because, like, you know, it's supposed to be before this one character really takes place in the world. And I know it sounds funny to be complaining about a 2D part of a show when 2D is usually the main medium for anime, but I really love the 3D style of the show, and the only using 2D elements for specific moments really hit hard when they did. But since they moved straight into 2D for most of it, I kind of didn't like it that much. And while I'm still loving the story, like, the story is still freaking fantastic. Like, story-wise, the show continues to be absolutely amazing, and I love it so much. The 2D aspect is the one thing I feel is dragging it down, because it's all just 2D, which means that the character movements are a bit more jagged than they were with the 3D animation, since they couldn't save the budget for the 2D elements to only be part of the episode instead of the entire episode. Even though I still think it's a very good anime and the story still continues to kick ass and it's just so good. The 2D aspect, as stupid as it sounds, is my one big complaint because I really wish we had more focus on the 3D aspect, but I know it's a narrative choice, so I'm not going to like dive into it like, well, you should do this in 3D. I know it's a narrative choice and I'm completely okay with that because at the end of the day, while I do wish it had more 3D elements later on in the story, I still love the characters and the world, and I still feel emotions for all the different aspects of the story, and I love it a lot, and I'm so excited to see where things go next because, dude, To Be Hero X is just cooking. I love this show. It is so good. It's already going to one of my top favorite anime of all time. It's just such a wild ride, and I've been loving it, and I'm so excited to see where things go next. And so far, I've loved all the characters. Like, all the main characters we focused on, there's not been a single main character that I haven't been invested in. And while I still think my favorite character out of all of them is Lin Ling, I'm very excited to see where all the rest of the heroes' stories go because so far, I'm amazed that the show has never lost quality. Like, even after we lost Lin Ling, as in he's no longer the main character that he was at the start, the next character after that, and the next character after that, like, every single character has continued to be peak after peak. It's been so good. I've been loving it so much, and that's why I give To Be Hero X a 9 out of 10. That's all I have to say on that because I feel like if I tried to talk about why I love To Be Hero X too much, I would end up dragging this video out for a whole hour. So with all that said, I really enjoy the series and I look forward to seeing where things go next. And that about wraps it up. Sorry I had to kind of speed through this one, but as I've already stated, the new season of anime has already started. In fact, at this time, we're a few episodes into a lot of these anime, and I have to start kind of getting into the groove of making the next one. But leaving that be, thank you all for watching, and if you're new to the JGC Anime channel, don't forget to subscribe because I always look at anime fans of the channel. And I hope everyone has an awesome day, and also, you know, look forward to the next multi-crit review, which will hopefully be coming sooner than this one, and yeah. That's all I have to say, so thank you all for watching, and I will see you all around. Peace!